Welcome back to the Mighty Emotions podcast. I am your host, Giselle G., a certified emotional resilience coach. And on this podcast, we're talking about emotions and we're talking about how we can understand what they communicate with us so that we can take aligned action and we can live lives of peace, of meaningful connections, of, joy, right? All the things that we want, love. Today's episode, I am talking about feeling helpless. I think we've all been there at one time or another. I'm really just speaking from my heart in this one. So, let it flow, let it go. We're talking about surrender. We're talking about, a higher power. If you're turned off by the idea of God or a higher power, I encourage you to just push through that discomfort and listen. Maybe something will resonate with you. Each of us is entitled to our own version of our lives. But I'm just sharing my perspective, what I've learned about overcoming that helplessness, and hopefully what I share can help you. So if you want to know more about that, then keep listening. Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Emotions podcast. I hope that wherever you are listening to this, that you are safe, that you are well. And that's such a vague term, but I guess I hope you feel safe wherever you are. And if you don't, I hope that you know that it's possible to feel safe in the future. Just hold on. Today's episode, I want to talk about helplessness. And I'm not exactly sure what I want to say, so it may be a bit rambly, but that's kind of how I like this podcast. And if you don't like that, I get it. There are other podcasts out there. But I speak from my heart, and I want to talk about this feeling of helplessness because I know it all too well. That feeling of being trapped, the fear, the sadness, the grief, the anger, and everything in between that comes up when we feel as though we have no power over our life, that we kind of descend into this nihilistic space of, just being powerless and disempowered. And, how do we get there? How do we end up there? Life happens, things happen, things that are bigger than us, things that beyond our human limits as one individual, right? There's a lot of things that require collective. A lot of things in our life requires the energy of more than one human coming together. And so sometimes we try to push the boulder up the hill by ourselves, and it's very heavy, and we feel helpless as a result because we are, right? And that's an indication that we need support. We need other people pushing that boulder with us, right? That is how we overcome helplessness. That is how we move into being empowered and being, assured that we are sovereign, we are amazing beings, but we have our limits, and we're extra amazing when we have support. So helplessness, feeling helpless, is a good indication that you're pushing that boulder up the hill alone and that you need support. And before we can even get to a place of support, the biggest takeaway that I know from feeling this helplessness is surrendering. Because for me, when I realize that it's hard to push that boulder up the hill, I tend to dive into feeling victimhood, to feeling powerlessness, to feeling grief and shame and sadness around the fact that I can't push this boulder up the hill all by myself. It's just a fact. It's a reality. I'm going with the boulder analogy. I hope it's vivid in your mind, because that's where we get to feeling this helplessness. And we have to first surrender. And surrender means a lot of things to different people, but in this context, I mean surrender is acknowledging what we honestly feel. Right? It's acknowledging that I feel really sad. I feel really scared. I feel really powerless right now. That is surrender. It's just saying that. It's just acknowledging that, owning that, accepting that that is the reality of where we are. Right? And all of a sudden, it's like you just stop The boulder's not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. But you stop trying to push it. You just stop. You just say, I can't do this by myself. And I'm sad about that. Or I'm angry about that. Or I'm afraid about that. That's surrender, right? And that's the first step that we need to take to move out of a state of helplessness. Because after we acknowledge that, and we let that air out that we're holding, holding our breath, trying to do it all by ourselves, and we let that air out, then we have space. We have choice. We have the option to seek help in whatever form, right? For me, I know I need help in the form of God, spirituality, a higher power, and I need help in the form of other human beings, right? And you might use the word universe or, higher values like love or goodness, whatever it might be, but there's always this idea of something greater than ourselves, something bigger than us, right? Whether that's the collective, whatever you want to call it, that energy, that's the energy we need to push that boulder. That's the energy that we need to move forward. But it starts with surrendering. It starts with saying, this is where I'm at. This is how I honestly feel. This is what I'm honestly capable of and what I'm not capable of on my own, right? Finding our power, reclaiming our power doesn't mean that the power is all ours, right? It means that we have power in the collective, we have strength in numbers, that when we reach out for help, when we acknowledge our limitations and we seek help and we get that help from others, we are empowered, right? That support that we need, that's normal, that's human. I think a lot of times in our society, especially today, there's the idea that we can do everything on our own. We can be self-sufficient. Even from childhood, it's the idea that kids should be self-sufficient, and they're just not. And not even kids, but adults, we're not self-sufficient all the time. We have limitations as humans. When we don't acknowledge those limitations, when we don't surrender to them, meaning we don't accept how we feel about our limitations, in whatever given circumstance or situation, we drive ourselves into feeling helpless, right? When we drive ourselves into feeling like isolated and alone and incapable. And there's nothing wrong with having limitations, and there's nothing wrong with being incapable, and there's nothing wrong with feeling sad about that. Each of us needs support. Where can we get that support is a whole other question. And getting that support comes in so many different forms, like I mentioned, a spiritual support, a God, a ritual, maybe you don't believe in God, but you believe in an ancestor that's passed on that you speak to, like a loved one, in a spiritual form. Like there's so many different ways, but having that spiritual support and then going to other humans and finding those places, finding those other humans that can add and give us that support. Like if we don't know how to do something, we go to someone that can teach us. We get a mentor, right? We get that support, we get that guidance, we get that direction. And then using that, all of a sudden we have the strength to push that boulder up the hill. All of a sudden that helplessness diminishes, right? Because we have help, right? We're never helpless. We're never unworthy of help. We're never unworthy of support. Support is the foundation of our humanity. Well, we need to be willing to give and receive that support. And for me, I had a very traumatic childhood where I didn't get that support when I needed it. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. And that's pretty common because, like I said, of how we've been conditioned to be self-sufficient, which is a lie, right? We are like an ecosystem, and each of us is dependent on one another. And that could be a whole other episode. But I know that there are times in our lives when we've sought support and we haven't received it, where we've gone to someone looking for help and they haven't been able to help us. Even today, like there are times when I'm really struggling and I wish that the people in my life had the capacity to help me. But the responsibility to find that help falls on me, right? And the idea that the first person I go to can't help me and so I give up, that falls on me. Our job is to keep seeking help. Go to someone else, go to somewhere else, keep seeking, put it out there, ask the universe, ask your guides, ask, whatever you believe in, right? Ask God, ask the higher power to find you that support, and keep seeking it and believing that eventually you will find it. I have found in my life that every time I need it, I find it. Every time that I look for it relentlessly, every time that I'm committed to finding that support and to getting help, I get it. The times when I gave up, the times when I thought I was helpless, the times when I thought I wasn't worthy of help have been the times where I've struggled the most. And the times where I've felt the most pressure to do it on my own because there wasn't anyone in front of me that could help me, that I could see, but I also wasn't willing to keep searching. I wasn't willing to keep looking for that help because it exists. It exists, and how badly we want it is going to determine whether or not we find it, right? We can't give up after the first person disappoints us, because it's not their job to meet our demands. It's our job to get our needs met, right? It's our job to keep seeking and to keep asking and to keep hoping and to keep going. That is where our resilience comes in, is that continued effort and that continued practice and that continued pushing forward, right? I think it's the biggest, most wonderful element of being alive is just the experience of it, the experience of life and all of its twists and turns, and the journey that we go on is beautiful. And it's not something we're meant to do alone. It's not an adventure we're meant to do alone. And when we are trying to do life alone, we're not really experiencing it, right? Like, have you ever experienced something alone and then experienced it with another person and just notice how magnified that experience was, how magnified the emotions were, the joy, the awe, the wonder, the, excitement is always so much bigger when we share it with someone else, when we spread it, right? And the reality is, even when we're the ones doing the helping, we feel so grateful. We feel so giving. Not if we're depleted, right? Not from a place of being resentful or being a martyr. When we're helping from a place of having our cup be full and really being able to give to others, we feel amazing to be able to do that. And that is what others can feel when we allow them to help us, right? Just because someone, let you down in the past and disappointed you in the past doesn't mean everyone will in the future. Doesn't mean everyone is going to disappoint you, in the same way. Because we have to be realistic. None of us are perfect, right? None of us are perfect. But that's why we need one another, where your strengths and my strengths might begin, and vice versa. Right? You might bring something to the table that I can't bring, but what I bring is going to make that table even more full. And that's what it's about. When we feel helpless, it's that the important thing to remember is that if we notice ourselves feeling helpless, if we notice ourselves thinking this is hopeless, and we know that we are trying to push that boulder up the hill alone, and we know that we can push it up the hill with others. And so it starts by surrendering. It starts by acknowledging how we honestly feel about where we're at and allowing ourselves to feel that, whatever it is. And then recognizing that that is communicating to us that we need to find support, and that it is our responsibility to keep looking until we find that support. And we need the physical support from other humans, and we need a spiritual support. A lot of people shy away from the spiritual aspect of things, but we can't deny that there's an energy and an essence that connects all of us, and that kind of covers all living things on this planet, right? Whatever you choose to call that thing, that belief that humans are not, all powerful, that we have limitations, that humility is really important. It is really important. It gives us perspective, And that perspective allows us to keep going and to be realistic and to be, that perspective allows us to live in harmony with our world, because we know that there's something bigger. So that spiritual support is just as important as that physical support. And even when we don't see it, or even when we don't get it right away, or even when someone lets us down the first time, it's our responsibility to keep seeking help. It's out there. And if we have that perspective that help is out there, and that if I keep looking, I'm going to find it, that is how we get out of feeling helpless. That is how we move into a space of love and gratitude and peace and contentment and all those positive emotions that we seek, right? That's how we push that boulder up the hill. That's how we achieve our goals. That's how we, move into a different world. That's how we create a different world, right? But we have to go through the difficult feelings. We have to go through the difficult thoughts. We have to surrender, and we have to look for help. And we have to believe that it's possible. We have to believe that the help is out there. My cat just joined us. She wants me to wrap it up, so that's what I'll do. Sometimes I don't feel like recording this, but the times when I do, I know that it's stuff that's on my heart that I need to get out there, and I hope something I said resonated with you. I really love you for listening and for sticking with me in this really unprofessional podcast here. I'm gonna just go cuddle with my cat, my little kitty Lita, and enjoy the rest of the day, whatever day you're listening to this. And remember that the help is there. It's there. You might not see it now. It might take some time before you find it, but if you keep looking, you will find it. You are worthy of help. You are deserving of help. You don't have to push that boulder all by yourself. All right. I'll see you in the next episode, guys. Bye.